All right, Lord Monckton, can you please tell us about yourself and give a bit of background on your history?
Yes, I'm a genius for hire. I was born at the age of 0 in London, very nearly in a London taxi cab, and the cabbie said, "Yeah, you can't have that in here, I'm not licensed for that sort of thing, besides it'd be an extra fare, wouldn't it?" So I then went to Harrow at Cambridge, was a journalist most of my life, also worked for Margaret Thatcher for 4 years in 10 Downing Street, and more recently have been going around the world telling people not to worry about global warming. It isn't going to be as much of a problem as the usual suspects say.
Now, of course, in Hawaii, we hear quite a bit about sea levels rising. We're on an island. We should worry about that kind of thing. Is that something that, in terms of global warming as well, what do you say to the people of Hawaii who might be concerned about things like that because we're on an island?
Well, first of all, if you look at your coastline, very little of it is at sea level. This is a volcanic island which rears up out of the sea. So even if the sea level were to rise by several feet, it wouldn't make much difference here in Hawaii. You'd be able to adjust very easily to that, particularly because it would take many millennia, according to the official findings, to rise by several feet. The official estimate of the UN's climate panel is 1 foot 5 inches of sea level rise over the coming century. But this has proved to be a very large exaggeration, because the actual rate of sea level rise over the last 8 years, measured by the ENVISAT satellite, which is the most accurate of all the sea level measuring satellites we have, has been at an equivalent rate of 1.3 inches per century, not feet per decade, inches per century. So it isn't happening as they said it would, and there's no real reason to suppose that it will.
So your writings have been featured around the world, and of course we've been lucky enough to print your reports in Hawaii Reporter. Thank you for that. What do you think is your most important work right now in terms of science?
I think the most important work that I'm doing is twofold. There are two great errors, central errors, in what one must still call the official climate message from governments, the UN's climate panel, scientific societies around the world, all of which are, of course, benefiting financially from having whipped up and maintaining this scare. But the two central errors are, first of all, the scientific one, which is that we are bound to get a large amount of warming. Their central estimate is 3.26 Celsius degrees, just short of 6 Fahrenheit degrees, over the next 90 years. Now, the actual warming so far over the last 20 years has been very, very close to zero. So little, in fact, that it isn't statistically significant. And I would expect to see my best estimate, because frankly we have so little reliable data to go on, and it's very difficult to tell. My best estimate would be you're looking at maybe 1 Celsius degree or 2 Fahrenheit of warming over the next 100 years as a result of our activities, and that frankly is too small and harmless to be in any way worth doing anything about. Let it happen. It's a good thing. So my main scientific contribution really is in pointing out that in the fundamental equation of climate sensitivity, which is the mathematical sum that tells you how much warming you're likely to get if you double the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere by the end of the century, very nearly all of the terms are unknown to a precision sufficient to allow us to work out, even to a resolution as vague as 1 Celsius degree, how much warming we're going to get. These terms are unknown and unknowable, unmeasured and unmeasurable. And I have just pointed out, come off it, you can't tell us to 2 decimal places how much warming we're going to get when all these terms in the equation are unknowable. Let me give you an example of what I mean. If I said, please multiply x by y, and then multiply again by z, and what's your answer? Come on, tell me the answer. And you can't, can you? Why can't you?
Not enough data.
Because you're bad at maths.
Well,
no,
that too. Well, you got me.
As you rightly said, not enough data. Unless you know, at least to some degree of precision, what the values of x, y, and z are, multiplying the 3 of them together doesn't give you an answer you can compute. That's the whole problem with climate science that they won't admit to. that the three key numbers that you multiply together to tell you how much warming you get when CO2 doubles, all of them are unknowable and unmeasurable to any sufficient precision. So it's simply guesswork. In the end, on that one, we're going to have to wait and see. So that's the scientific side of what I've worked on. The economic side says, okay, let's pretend we're going to see 3¼ Celsius of warming over the next 90 years. Even though it's only been 0 Celsius so far this millennium, but let's pretend. Well, even then, it would still be 10 times cheaper, perhaps even 100 times cheaper, to do nothing about it, sit back, enjoy the sunshine and the extra warmth, and adapt in a focused way to any adverse consequences of that warming that might occur, only if, only when, only where, and only to the extent that it might occur, than it would be to spend a single red cent now. We should not spend any money on this now. The economic case is clear, and for those of you who do science by consensus, which I don't, the consensus in the economic peer-reviewed literature is that it simply isn't worth spending very much money, if any, at present, on trying to make global warming that isn't happening very much anyway go away.
Okay, so what about Al Gore? You've taken on his claims in the past. He's, of course, our former vice president. Tell me about what you've challenged him on and what you've been able to accomplish in terms of that.
Al Gore said sea level was going to rise by 20 feet imminently, and yet in the year he made that forecast, while he was making his mawkish sci-fi comedy horror movie that all your kids are made to watch 3 or 4 times during their school career, he said that sea level was going to rise. He had just bought a condo costing $4 million, feet from the ocean, allegedly rising ocean, at Fisherman's Wharf, San Francisco. The address might have given him a clue to the fact, even if he hadn't seen the place, that it would soon get drowned by the rising water. He himself does not and did not believe a word he says about any of this. It is simply a way of making a fortune, because the left had adopted this climate rubbish as an article of religious faith. They don't realise they've got religion now, the left. They all think in a sort of robotic way without thinking for themselves, and they've bought into this. And Al Gore realised he could make money by dressing it up as though he was doing a scientific presentation, which of course he is wholly unfitted to do. He knows far less science and mathematics than I do, and I have no qualifications in the subject either. But at least I do have enough mathematics to make sure that the buildings I design do not fall over, which means I understand a little bit about calculus, for instance. And you need to know that in order to understand whether the scientists are talking sense. He doesn't know any of that. He got it wrong on sea level, he got it wrong on polar bears, there are 5 times as many of them as there were before. He got it wrong on the Arctic sea ice, which he said will all be gone by next year, and there's still masses of it up there. Every single gloomy, doomy prediction that he made has not come to pass, is not coming to pass, and is not going to come to pass. It was all exaggerated beyond all reason, and we took him to court in the UK. I wrote the scientific testimony in the case, which was eventually signed off on by 2 eminent scientists, because of course a non-scientist putting in scientific testimony in court says, why should we pay any attention to this? But these were 2 eminent scientists. They said, well, yes, polar bear populations have increased. Sea level isn't going to rise 20 feet. And all of these things are exaggerations. So the Polynesian islands, for instance, are not disappearing beneath the waves. There are no climate refugees. The UN said there were going to be 50 million climate refugees by 2010. My watch says it's 2012. Where are all these refugees? Have they drowned in the rising seas? No, they haven't. All of these exaggerated predictions made in order to enrich those who are making them at our expense have failed and will continue to fail.
Okay, any final thoughts for Hawaii or anyone else that you wanted to reach out to?
Well, as far as the global warming thing is concerned, just sit back and enjoy the sunshine. There is nothing to worry about any more than we always have to worry about the climate. The climate, by its nature, changes. It's been changing for 4,567 million years since the first wisps of atmosphere formed. You're too young to remember that, but that's how it's always been. It's how it always will be. And our contribution to it, though not negligible, will not be enough to be harmful.
All right, thank you so much. It's been an honor to meet you, and thank you for joining us. Go ahead.
I had one question. If you could mention a fellow by the name of John Carroll that you met on this trip.
No, that comes in the next bit.
Yep.
Oh, okay.